Audio check 1212. Audio check 1212. Just doing a quick vibes. Hey, Koopa! Good to see you, friend. Thank you so much for popping in. I hope everyone's having a good day so far today. We are just getting things kicked off here. Making sure all my I's are dotted and all my T's are crossed and yada yada yada. You guys know the drill by now. This ain't new. For those of you guys who are new to the channel, let me just make sure I've got this last little bit open. And I think I need to have, I need to have a little bit of stuff open for Gentry. I should have my sketch pads here, all ready to go. There we go. And one more picture, just for the fun of it, because I can. There we go. Beautiful. All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm the Last Omnitect, your favorite robot American, and I am the author of 2 webcomics, Gentry, Dolaan, Ain't No Fascist, a Helldivers 2 fan comic, and Brothers, a Tale of Treachery and Doom. And, welcome to my little art stream where you and I vibe. Good morning, everybody. Hold on, still adjusting. I got a new chair the other day. Actually quite happy with this thing. Managed to score it from a family member who's been sort of scrounging around offices as they toss out their office chairs. I gotta tell you, I don't know why anyone threw this thing out. It's perfect. It's so good. A little bit of dusting off and polishing, and she was good to go. Which is good news for my back, because you guys didn't know this, but a couple of weeks ago I was in my chair for so long, I literally sprained my ass, and I had to get myself a whole cushion for my chair. So, it's nice to finally be in a chair that's actually well-made. Finally. So, I'm currently vacillating between 2 major projects, as I mentioned at the start of the hour, in terms of webcomics, which is my Helldivers 2 Trader Diver style, Trader Style Diver 2 webcomic, Gentry, Dolaan, Ain't No Fascist, which follows the tales of the titular main character, Gentry Dolaan, a super Australian former CMOS scientist turned Helldiver and now turned trader. It's been very fun doing that one. And the other one being Brothers, which is a tale set in the grimdark future. Not in the grimdark future of the 41st millennium. Let me be clear about that. Because I'm sure somewhere out there, Games Workshop is sharpening their knives. No. This is not your property. This is actually one-page rules. Because one-page rules actually is willing to let artists do shit in their universe. So, anyway. This stream has been going longer than 5 minutes at this point, so I can do that. I can officially drop the double finger. Yes. So today we're going to be doing a little bit of character art, but first I want to take a brief little moment and mention that I may or may not have posted a little preview of the upcoming week's Gentry, Dolaan, Ain't No Fascist public release. Because for those of you who don't know, on my Patreon, which, by the way, if you're following this, or if you're watching this, please like, subscribe, comment. You guys know the drill. It's YouTube. I'm a small channel. Everything we can do to get started, that hits me where I live. 2, if you really want to back me, you can support me on Patreon. I will probably not ever be monetizing this YouTube channel, unless things really go right. So if you are curious about how to support me or where to, your best bet is right there at patreon.com/TheLastOmnitect. Good news, you get a bunch of free updates. You get a bunch of, the entire catalog of both my webcomics in one place, neatly organized, so you can read from the beginning for both of my stories. Plus, any work I do on TTRPGs or anything will pop up on there. So, keep an eye out. And if you are a paying contributor, because you don't need to be paying to join there, you can join for free and still get access to all that stuff I just mentioned. If you're a paying contributor, you get those comics 2 weeks early. Now, why do I mention this? Well, because let's just say this week, things are going to get a little spicy in the webcomic. I'm very excited for it. So, that's all the spoiler you guys get. I know there's at least one person who's been reading the comic on, I believe, Red Right Hand's Discord is going to be super excited. They've been begging me to finally show Gentry's arm cannon at work. So, now you know. Now you'll get a chance to do it. So this week we're going to be doing a little bit of various character designer. I hope you all are doing well. Koopa, I hope your morning's been going smoothly. I can see you in the chat. And anyone else who's currently out there watching, this is live. This is not a pre-recorded video. I would never release a pre-recorded video this messy. I actually do have some standards. So, we're going to start with this. Genuine question for anyone who's currently watching. Which of these two topics do you think we should deal with first? Do you think we should address the brothers with my adorable little round boy here and start talking about this and do a little bit of lore and art for this faction, or do a little more Gentry, Dolaan ain't no fascist work today? Because I'm excited to do both. You might, so weigh in the comments right now, in the live stream comments, Gentry or brothers, your pick. And I'm literally just going to go by what I see most common in the comments. I'm going to sort of separate these two out at the moment so you guys can actually at least see them. It's one of those weird, like, the angle is slightly off kind of dealies. There we go. Yep, every time. There we go. So we're going to center that. The little boy. I actually love this little guy. Fun fact, this design isn't entirely mine. This is actually a 3D printed option for Cyber Swarms that I really, really liked. I'll see if I can find the actual creator because I want to give them credit. It's very cute. Round boy first? Round boy first it is. Alright, so we're just going to put that in there. Alright. So we've started recently delving, and I just want to make sure I got this right. This is going to be an Etsy listing. And I want to make sure I got this. This is going to be in my favorites. You guys can't see my Etsy because I don't want you to see the millions and millions of things I've been looking up on there. It's a mess. It's a giant mess. So many options. See swarms. Here we go. And the original creator, because this is just the 3D printer that I've gotten to. Let's see. Item details. Here we go. Part of the stars. Show me the actual. Here we go. Okay. So, the actual creator of this is Archvillain Games, in terms of the design. This, if I can get to the sci-fi. Oh man, there's some really great releases lately. Here we go. I'll just show you the actual Etsy page for this. This is what we're actually drawing here. Okay, fine. Do it that way. That's fine. I'll just open it the old-fashioned way. Here we go. Okay. That is what I've drawn. These little guys. Technically, these are for originally like Necron proxies, but I wanted to have something a little rounder and softer and more pleasant. And hey, Amant, good to see you. Welcome aboard. Pleasure to have you on. So yeah, I wanted to do something, my little take on these guys. They're very fun. I use them right now for my Saurian Star host in one-page rules, which is, again, what the actual webcomic is based in. So, if you can sort of see the clear and obvious connection between these two. Round boy, swarm of round boys. I think I covered it pretty well. For those of you who are wondering, yes, I actually have these little guys painted. There's about, I think, 6 of these bases lying around, since they can be bought in units of 3. So, keeps things easy for me. So what I've been working on for Brothers is the adversarial factions that our titular battle brothers will be fighting. And again, I said it in, not in Warhammer 40,000, but in one-page rules, specifically because, actually, 2 things. One, I'm personally not a fan of Games Workshop's business practices, and I vote with my wallet and my feet. So, I played Warhammer 40k for the better part of, 20 years. So, not just waiting on who enjoys it. If you're enjoying it, you have fun. No judgment whatsoever. However, me personally, I'm not particularly a fan of how much they have increased the prices on every single kit. I don't like their rules release model. It's very predatory. They're very FOMO-driven, and pretty much all their effort goes behind their tournament scene now, as opposed to their narrative scene. Plus, also on top of that, really don't like how they've been dabbling a lot in fascistic imagery without any real effort. So I say this as someone who has thought a long time about it. One-page rules is significantly easier. It's free. Literally, it's free to play. As long as you have models, you have the ability to play one-page rules. The rules are free to download for every single faction. They're much more intuitive. The games go faster. And that's a good thing for me because I like to get multiple games in a day. So me and my friends get to play with it. So anyway, it also gives me access to all these really cool sub-factions. So we have been working a little bit on... We've already talked a little bit about, like, the actual titular Battle Brothers of this setting, which are... They have many different variations. So far, One Page Rules has not released an official, like, model for them yet. They've dropped some official art for them, but they vary. And from what I can tell, their art is actually inspired by a Hero Forge model, unless someone is sculpting something inspired by a Hero Forge model, which is perfectly fair. I wanted to do a bit of everything, because one of the coolest parts of One Page Rules is it's miniature agnostic, which means, unlike Warhammer, you actually can bring whatever models you have to the table, so long as they very reasonably approximate what you're fielding, you're good. So, for me, my Battle Brothers come in 4 different flavors, at least as far as the webcomic goes at the moment, and those are the 4 members of the Watch Charybdis. I'm going to open up one of the other existing comics so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Here we go. Okay, so, the Watch Charybdis, which is the faction that the brothers in this setting are in, is actually a multi-part org. It's basically 4 what would be called in One Page Rules detachments, what in 40k we would call a chapter. It's 4 detachments working in tandem, and each detachment has their own cultural identity attached to it. So, we have, going from left to right, the Battle Brothers of the Knights Numenary, who are the traditional Primaris Space Marine design. For those of you who are really into Games Workshop, they're the most familiar. They're also the ones based off the most models I collected. For the record, I started as a Tau Empire army player in 40k, way back in the day. Back before it was Tau Empire, it was just the Tau, Codex Tau. And so before they even added an apostrophe, and it was just Codex Tau. So the second army I collected was Primaris Space Marines, because they were cheap, and I always liked Space Marines. I just kind of wish that they had rescaled them, and Primaris Space Marines did that, and they even had helmets that looked like the old Maximus armor helms that I really liked, so I kind of just ran with them. So I collected a nice army of those guys, because they also came in cheap in, like, double-sided battle boxes you could buy with your friends. So the next would be the Guardians Culprite here, who the Guardians Culprite are actually based off of, I believe, Army Forge miniatures. I actually have one of them here. There we are. Let's see if I can actually get a little camera shot of this. There we go. So these guys. I think it's Station Forge or Army Station. I'll find the actual, like, sculptors. These guys are great. I actually very much like their design. And they're all basically heavy Battle Brothers. So for those of you familiar with the heavy Intercessor range of Warhammer 40k, you'd be familiar. So that'd be our second sub-faction, Guardians Culprite. Third faction would be the Vendors Titian, a descendant of the Space Wolves, or in this setting, Wolf Brothers. They are technically Fox-themed, and I actually use a couple of Vanguard miniatures, Vanguard Space Marine miniatures to represent them. Again, from 40k. I don't have many of them, but a little bit. And then finally, we have our last army here, and that would be the Arachnia Astra, which are actually, all these chapters, by the way, my homebrew. Not a single one of these is Codex. Not a single one of these is from 40k. I want the entire T of this webcomic to be my intellectual property where I can. So that way no one can pop in and go, I'm sorry, but you can't use the word Ultramarine. Yeah, you're right, I can't, so I don't. That's my stuff. The Arachnia Astra, actually, are going to be represented ultimately by... This is not really a spoiler, because the whole premise of Brothers, A Tale of Treachery and Doom is that these guys all fall. Every one of these chapters is doomed, in case the name of the webcomic wasn't clear. So the Arachnia Astra eventually will be represented by Ravaged Star Space Marine miniatures, so the Ravaged Star Veil Touched. And if that sounds familiar, then that's because Ravaged Star is actually a game found run by Mini Wargaming Dave and MiniWargaming.com, and it's their bespoke grimdark setting and wargame that they've been working on for a long time. Their miniatures are gorgeous. Literally, if you like this art, if you think this art looks sick, this is what the models look like. Right now, unfortunately, they're currently being waylaid as a result of all the chaos going on with tariffs in the US. Which, by the way, just a reminder, please, for the love of God, if you are out there and you are not in the US, understand, at least as far as I'm concerned, a lot of the folks in the US know what we have wrought, and we hate it. We hate it. I didn't vote for this idiot, and I certainly didn't want this crazy tariff shit. But here we are. So, unfortunately, Ravaged Star is produced by a Canadian company. Their models are made in China, and they are shipped to the US for distribution. So they get hit with both sides of the tariffs. It's pretty bad. So, hooray. Hopefully things will become a little more stable and loosen up so they can actually ship their models out. Those poor guys have been getting so much crap thrown their way. I really want their like whole Ravaged Star range to succeed. So eventually, these guys, these models are going to be the baseline that I'm going to be using for the Arachnia Astra, with a lot of conversion. As you might have noticed from the Arachnia Astra, as I shrink this down and move it, they got 4 eyes. Anyone know Latin? I hope you know Latin if you're watching or listening to a 40k thing, because that would translate out to space spiders, more or less. Really rough abbreviation. But, yeah, these guys are basically my old Space Spiders army, which I'm going to be remaking for this. Beautiful. Let me just open this up. Should be under... I think it's on the TTRPG stuff. I did a whole guest campaign with this, where I was playing in a Black Crusade campaign. So you guys can actually see what they look like on both sides, both as loyalists... That'd be our Arachnia Astra. And then, when they fall, you guys will get to see way more of them eventually. I think this is the right one. And when they fall. I'm very excited to get around to this, but I like my stories to develop narratively. Just know that they are doomed. All of them. What you're following is to see how and in what way they fall. So, these are 4 major factions, at least of the brothers in the region, but they're not alone out here. The Charybdis sector is a part of the galaxy that's been separated from the rest of the galaxy, in part by the chaos currently occurring in the Sirius sector, which is where the whole, like, bulk of Grimdark Future, the one-page rule setting, takes place in. But basically, most of the Marines are actually trapped in that sector, along with most of the humans who, by the way, humans and Marines in that setting, they're actually split. So, much like the Horus Heresy, but where the Horus Heresy happened because of chaos, in Grimdark Future it happened because it turns out eugenicist transhuman policy doesn't exactly fly with the average person. And so you had the humans who didn't like the equivalent of the Emperor going around and making superhuman warriors to effectively rule the galaxy and make it his own little personal empire. And the Battle Brothers largely fighting on the side of the, at the time I believe his name was the Founder, the big badass Emperor figure. And so these two sides have fought significantly. In this setting, they just straight up said, yeah, the Battle Brothers are probably the bad guys. And you should be aware of that. They are fighting for a fascistic authoritarian government, as they are in the normal game. But in the normal game, I should say in 40k, they go through a long period of trying to excuse it, making a million reasons why that's not necessarily a bad thing. In Grimdark Future, they say, no, it's a bad thing. You shouldn't... They are absolutely not great. They're not good guys. Everyone's got their flaws, including our titular heroes. So just be aware of that. So we have ourselves... Anyway, long and short. In the Sirius sector, all these factions are competing. But the brothers are trying to find their way back to Earth. They're trying to find their way back home. And so, They've sent out dozens of research groups at the edges of the Sirius sector and beyond to try to find their path back home, since they arrived here as a result of some horrifying wormhole shit that they can't really go back. Well, one of those regions that they sent exploration forces to and to colonize is the Charybdis sector, named for a giant black hole that exists within it. And as a result, we should probably talk about, well, what's going on in the sector. Thus, the flowchart of animosity, which is... I frequently go back to this when I'm trying to figure out where shit's going down. So, in the middle we have our four Watch Charybdis factions. The Knights Numenary, Guardians Culprite, Arachnia Astra, Venators Titian. These four sub-factions represent the heart of what's referred to in the one-page rules as the Protectorate and its forces. The Protectorate is where the Battle Brothers are. So, you have the Human Defense Force fighting for the human government within the region, also just referring to, like, broadly called the Human Sector. And you have the Protectorate and its region, which is protected by Battle Brothers. So these guys are all representing the Protectorate and their interests here in the Charybdis sector. They formed a group known as the Watch Charybdis, which is basically a joint strike force task force where all four of them have created a coalition to defend the region as efficiently as they can, even though they are vastly outnumbered. You all know the drill with Space Marines. There's never enough, and there's always more fighting. However, as you can tell, with all those red arrows, which show who's attacking who, there's a lot of fighting going on. From within the Watch Charybdis, or from within the Charybdis sector, the threats from within, we have four major factions. Local Havoc cults, who are exactly what they sound like. Think Chaos, but off-brand. Chaos Light. Chaos Pepsi, if you will. New Coke Chaos. That's actually a joke, but really, they're actually kind of cool. Havoc cults are, in this setting, very much in more of an earlier Warhammer 40k style of approaching chaos. They view Havoc as a force that can be tapped. There's wormholes that can open into these other places, and that's where these demons have come forth from. And these demons bring power. Power that can be quantified and utilized. And Havoc cults are willing to treat in that power for ambition and gain. They realize it's dangerous. They don't care. They're more than happy to play around with it. Next, the Tau Union. If you're familiar with the Tau Empire, similar, but not quite. The Tau Union, one, don't have their own range of models. I'm actually using some really cool Piper Makes Poiper models. They're really cool. Highly recommend Piper Makes. They're so good. The Tau Union actually have a very simple backstory. They are a relatively normal empire for a long time, driven by mostly logic and science, and eventually they make artificial intelligence. Really great stuff until the AI starts getting a little uppity. And they realize, oh shit, we're kind of outnumbered by them. And so, they basically go through this whole thing of an AI revolution. And now, in the modern era, they don't actually, they don't use artificial intelligence beyond a certain level at all. They've outright banned it. Their perspective is simple. No machine should do what a person can. So in a weird kind of way, the Tau Union are kind of like the Tau Empire if they had the Butlerian Jihad, more or less. Similar technology, very much based in long-range combat, utilizing mech suits, and they do utilize simple drone tech. But for the most part, the Tau Union don't use AI. They intentionally use incredibly intelligent thinkers to do most of their work, and they use machines for computation, but that's about it. Next, the exact opposite of the Tau Union, the Robot Legions. Think Necrons, but a little distinctive. In one-page rules, the Robot Legions have this entire perspective where they were actually created by, in this setting, the Space Elves, basically Eldar. At the height of their empire, the Eldar decided they were going to make machines to do all their tasks for them. And much like the Quarians and the Geth, things got out of control when they started treating their self-aware machines, or I should say, started treating their machines like tools, and then the machines became self-aware. And didn't like that. Rebellion followed. The Space Elves were kicked out of their empire, literally on the map. There's a whole chunk of the space in the Sirius sector that says formerly Elvish Empire. Now the Robot Legions, exist in a hardened core there. They are one of the oldest factions in the setting. They've been around for quite some time. And for the most part, they are self-aware and independent. Each of them have their own perspective, depending on who's leading them. Each of their different detachments and legions have their own personality. But there is one regionally here, known as the Norilis Sep. And they're doing their own thing. And then finally, the Saurian Star Host. We're getting back to that round boy. I told you we'd get back to that round boy. The Saurian Star Host, which you guys have seen before, at least in regards to the various art we produced. Here we go. These guys. So, Saurian Star Host. They're probably one of my favorite factions. First off, older than almost anything else in the galaxy. Hands down. These guys were traipsing around at the dawn of time. Basically, all of them are homegrown. There's no such thing as natural reproduction for them anymore. They literally are crafted to task. So, when you're born as a Saurian, you rise out of a spawning pit, not entirely unlike the lizardmen of Age of Sigmar / Warhammer Fantasy. However, when they're born, they're given a task and a premonition on what they have to do. They are completely devoted to that task. They organize themselves in a loose coalition of roles based on what type they are. Either, if you're talking about the heftiest guys, Gators, who represent the bulkiest, most durable of their folk, designed to make construction work and heavy warfare easier. You have the Saurians, the war leaders and the basic, I would say the tactical cunning acumen. And then finally, you have the Geckos. The Geckos, who are the most intellectual and also weedy of them. And the fourth major faction, whose model I do not have in my hands, are Frog Mages, the actual creators of this faction, and the ones who can literally divine things through super science and magic. So these guys are kind of a lot like the Covenant, in a lot of ways. They are driven by what they believe is their goal, their immutable purpose. They know how to cultivate the galaxy, and they've been sleeping away in stasis chambers for centuries. And now that they're all waking up one by one, each star host rising from antiquity, they're setting out to find other frog mages across the galaxy. These guys are the oldest empire in the Charybdis sector. And they woke up in front of a bunch of kids playing on their lawn. They're not okay with it. And so these guys are the first adversaries we're going to be seeing in the comic. In fact, actually, they're already there. So that's our threats from within the Charybdis sector. The threats from without, we have the Human Defense Force, representing the bulk of humanity in the Sirius sector, who've never been cool with the Protectorate, and as far as they're concerned, they are at open war with these guys, or at very best, Cold War. Sister Missionaries, who are in this force, are kind of more of a, how would I describe them? They are very much like classical Knights Templar, in a sense. They go where they feel they're called to aid people, and they'll often traipse over other sectors in their governments. They're not particularly on one side or the other of the Human Defense Force Protectorate war, but they absolutely will fight the second they feel that civilians are at risk. And if they feel like they're being driven there by their god, who is, by the way, pretty freaking awesome, actually. She's literally actually the first human who ascended to legitimate godhood in this setting. She's pretty fucking cool. There's two other alien races as well that are very mysterious and no one's really sure precisely where they're from. The Chelkit and the Chorus. These are two completely homebrew alien species of my design. The Chelkit being raiders across the sector, cyborgers, and pirates, basically plundering wherever they can go, not being easy to reason with. No one really knows how they communicate, and they're distinctly alien. The Chorus, on the other hand, are actually mysterious. Not necessarily malicious, but they've begun to appear and skirmish and cause havoc on the edges of the Watch Charybdis and its territories. And no one's really sure what their goals are. Highly psychic, incredibly cunning, very stealthy, almost demonic, but definitely not. We know that they have a physical form, they are biological. And so all these forces are at war with one another. And each chapter, each detachment has more or less made one of these threats their personal problem. The Venator's Titian guard the extreme edges of the sector, and thus they sort of bump up the most against the threats from without. The Missionaries, the Human Defense Force, and even possibly rivalries within the Protectorate. But also they end up fighting the Chelk and the Chorus since they attack a lot of supply lines. So the Venator's Titian are kind of stretched thin, but that's sort of their whole thing. They are Space Marines in the classical sense. The Arachnia Astra specialize in fighting against the forces of Havoc, and so they've taken their personal mission to be rooting out Havoc cults across the sector wherever they appear. The Guardians Culprite specialize in fighting against machines, literally having built most of their technology around defeating artificial intelligence. They literally have seals for their emblems, which are made out of Culprite crystal and gold, which are basically designed to act like endless labyrinths, traps for artificial intelligence attempting to invade their armor. So they fight the Tau Union and the Robot Legions. And finally, the Knights Numenary sort of fight wherever they need to fight. As a result, the Robot Legions and the Saurian Star Host end up being the ones they fight the most. So this is our whole spread of animosity across the sector. I need to really upload this image to Patreon. I'm really excited to do so, to talk about the different factions, and give folks a little peek behind the wheel. But today we're talking about our favorite Angie guys, our favorite angry lizards, the Saurian Star Host. And that, right now, would be... I guess that'd be the lore file here. So, in addition to our Battle Brothers and the Charybdis Militia, who all serve underneath the Protectorate and the Battle Brothers there, we get to Saurian Cyber Swarms. So Saurians are interesting. They don't really use, and I'm going to start doing some art now. It isn't just a lore dump today. We are doing art. So Cyber Swarms aren't just a bunch of little buggos. Cute as they are. Cute as a button, for sure, but that's not really why they're there. Also, we just fix this here. There we go. We're good. I got tired of that super huge thing being there. So Cyber Swarms are actually an interesting little peek into how the Saurians do business. They don't really utilize traditional vehicles or traditional equipment very often. Their technology is very advanced, but their biggest edge is genetic technology. So as a result... pardon. Gross. Let me just catch all this. So these little guys actually represent a very interesting little bit. I'm just going to duplicate this. It's going to be the swarm base. Turn that off. Take the little guy back here. So these little guys represent a rather interesting confluence of their technology. As opposed to simply just utilizing a machine to do a task, like a drone the Tau Union would use, or even the Kasurians, the Eternal Dynasty, the other half of the Tau Empire in this setting. Actually a very kind of cool sub-faction of their own. Not involved in this webcomic yet, though. These guys, instead, use organics for nearly everything. So, as opposed to making a drone out of just machinery, they'll grow a simple intelligence, and literally utilize that. Traditionally, those are like lizards, snakes, birds, what have you. However, this far out on the edge, I themed it so that these guys actually utilize... And let me just pop this over here. Here we go. These guys actually literally grow little brains and then put them inside of simple armatures to do their tasks. Literally creating little life forms to do these tasks for them. I'm just going to quickly hit this with a little bit of... This is like a 15%. Here we go. And I believe behind me, I have an objective marker or two that I can use. Ah, yes. Here we go. Yeah. Pardon the loud noises. There we go. Come on. I want my objective markers. Should be right. Oh, goodness. Come on, buddy. I believe in you. Yeah. Should be right in here. Aha! Perfect. So I've done a bunch of little conversions for objective markers for my army. And I'll be using those here as a narrative point. Hopefully that wasn't so quiet that no one heard that. Yeah. Basically, a little conversion. We have an interesting peek at a piece of the Saurians' culture. And that would be what they fight over. These strange devices with these gemstones attached to the top. Now, these devices aren't actually built with the gemstones on them. Instead, these are harvesters. When placed down on a planet, they naturally pull that gemstone out of the ground and begin to cultivate it into a form that can be utilized. We're just going to call this what it is. This is going to be cultivators. These little devices have been popping up all across the Charybdis sector and causing a whole buttload of panic by colonists, because wherever these things show up, the Saurians inevitably follow to collect on them. Let's see. I'm thinking I'll use this one because I really like the design of it. It's very simple. Okay. Whatever this resource is, the Saurians prize it significantly, and they're willing to fight and die for it en masse. I'm just going to give it a very simple little, like, rounded top shape to it. I just want to make sure I get this shape correct. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, let's take this and shrink this just a little bit more. I want to make sure we have enough space in here to do what we gotta do. Cool. These cultivators are the primary thing that these Saurians seem to be fighting over in the region most doggedly. They're willing to let land go, but these things not so much. This has brought them into a lot of conflict with the Knights Numenary, but no one's really sure precisely, like, why they're so bent out of shape over these things appearing. That's a secret that we'll have to discover in the webcomic. I do also want to kind of do a little bit of art for the weapons today, because I very much like the Saurian Star Host and their weaponry. It's a very cool aesthetic. They're very Mesoamerican, like, dinosaurs in that way. Like, literally using, like, plasma mahuahitos and stuff. I like to think of them as, like, a combination of the... Like, everyone often points to them as being like, oh, they're just very clearly, like, lizardmen in space. To which I say, it's more like they're lizardmen if the lizardmen meant the Covenant. And I kind of love that about them. They're a Mesoamerican flavored Covenant that really just happen to be raptor people. That's really cool to me. So we're just going to take that over here. And we're just going to bring this in. Now, Saurians actually have a couple of interesting little weapon types, but we'll get more into that as we do work. If anyone's got any questions about any of the webcomics I do, whether that be Gentry or Brothers, please feel free to ask them now. I also know that I have a little segment I need to do at the end of this because I've been dodging doing it for a couple of weeks by complete accident. I haven't been trying to forget it, I promise. My brain is full of bees. Where I sort of answer questions that folks have. And I think I have at least like 2 questions that recently were asked. At least in regards to Gentry. Let's round this off a little more. It's a little too wide. That's a little better. Cool. I just put a couple of boulders in the background, a couple simple rocks and stuff. I could actually take this little guy, move him behind, have I'm sort of peering around the side of it. I kind of like the idea of him peering around the side. It's kind of cute. Or hanging out in front. Let's have him hang out in front of this thing. That works. Underneath here, we're going to give him a nice little quick whitewash, so he's got some stuff to do on here. 100. So that way I don't have to worry about anything behind him cutting through it. Opacity is a huge deal for me, because I tend to do stuff with portraits. So as a result, if there's any like line art or anything behind whatever I draw, it can actually bleed through quite constantly. So it's a pretty endless fight to maintain the color that I end up working on. Perks and disadvantages of working in digital medium. Sometimes the digital medium actually has got issues. Okay, so we're going to do the actual cultivator. Cool. Sketch, and we're going to save this fast so I don't lose any work. Okay. There's a simple pattern on this that's repeating. I believe it's shaped like this. Yeah, that works. Roughly like that. Then we have the same pattern repeat over here. Beautiful. And I round this out with a wall of black in the middle. There's like a little bit of like a rising shape out of it. It actually is a relief. So there we go. So these devices come in all shapes and sizes. This is just a variety of them. They almost always sort of look like pottery. That's kind of what I'm going for. Like to anyone else, I'd just be like, "Oh, that's a cute little curio. What is that?" "Oh, it's just this little thing I found inside of like a random tomb." "Oh, that's cool," said the colonizer plundering a tomb. But they're more than just little baubles that are interesting. They actually have a function. Let's make sure I got this right. That'll do. Sure, that works. My brother in Christ, someone tell me I don't have it on the art page. Goodness, it's been like this for how long? It's an art stream, not a stare at my beautiful face stream. There we go. Alright. Well, you know, that's the proof right there that we're live. If there was ever any doubt that you needed, like, if you needed anything revealed, well, there you go, guys. I make mistakes just like everybody else on this platform. Alright, cool. That'll do. So we have this sort of coming down to about like here. A couple more rocks and stuff scattered around. Cool. And we have a couple more little blades of grass and stuff. Now the nice thing is doing grass is actually pretty easy for the most part. You just got to make sure you sort of do it right, and you're usually pretty good. We're just going to sort of have some rolling hills in the background. Cool. Let's do ourselves a quick color pass over all this. This gives us a little bit of volume to work with, and a generalized shape that sets it apart from the rest. Beautiful. Now that we're here, I can set that up. Since basically almost anywhere you can look in the sky, in the Charybdis sector, you will usually see the black hole somewhere. Way off in the distance. I'm going to close some of these here. Yep. Yep. And I think, yeah, we can close this one. No modification. Close this guy. Awesome. Save this here. And I believe I have it on the most recent webcomic. Yeah, here we go. I'm going to grab the skybox out of one of these webcomics because I just really liked how it turned out. There we go. Beautiful. And I'm just going to grab this color and stick this in the background. There we are. We're going to also slightly increase the brightness of the sky in the background. As much as I really like this sky, and I really do, it's really more for like a dark evening, and this is kind of like a midday pretty scene. Or I could do it darkened. When in doubt. When in doubt, pinky out. Alright, so that gives us a solid baseline to work off of here. So let's see, for the actual metal. These little guys so I can see. Cool. So let's get ourselves a nice shade of gold here and gray. It's like the same material that the drones are made out of usually. Let's make this a darken, shall we? Put that at like 45. Here we go. And we get ourselves a nice deep earthy brown to finish that off. Sort of get that little indentation around them. Because again, they are a relief. There we go. Cool. And just a couple of quick passes gets you some pretty good results in terms of, like, color depth. Cool. Let's hit up a solid shade of, like, ruddy brown. There we go. Go, get that nice earthy brown tone going. Slightly brighter on the far side. And now we can start putting a little bit of color into this. I often recommend to folks to play around with color a lot. And one of the best ways to do that is with, like, unique lighting conditions. A lot of people will draw their characters or their, like, art, and they'll keep it in, like, one very, like, very flat, like, color environment. You know, like bright midday. A lot of anime tends to do that. A lot of TV shows and comics tend to do that for expediency. It's not a bad thing, for the record. It's just very visibly obvious. If you really want to understand how light plays across a piece of work you're doing, I highly recommend try drawing the same scene twice. Draw it once in the middle of the day, draw it once in the evening, and hell, if you really want to try something interesting, draw it at dawn. No one really thinks about dawn, but it's actually a really great time to explore. Dawn and dusk actually add color to whatever you're drawing. If you're at dusk, the sky is usually a deep blue, indigo, which means everything is a little more purple. Whereas, if you're in the morning, the sky reflects a warm, reddish, orangey light, usually, from the rising of the sun. So as a result, you get this very strong kind of reddish-orange glow, and it slowly fades to yellow, which eventually fades to white, where it's the other way around for dusk. So early dusk, evening, afternoon, you're looking at, like, usually golds, then going into oranges to reds, and then finally indigo. So play around with that time of day. And if you're in the middle of the night, you have a real treat, because you have moonlight to play with, which is basically fluorescent blue lighting. Really gets to be fun at that level. Also, at night and evening, color contrast comes alive. You start getting some really nutty color play, which is, I think, awesome. And for the record, for some folks who think that's actually more difficult to draw, I actually find it easier. Sharp contrast lets you really highlight a lot of the edges and details of your stuff with a much easier time. It's a lot simpler to be like, oh yeah, I just want to draw this. Okay, well, I only have a line of light to play with. Well, that line of light gives you everything you need. I'm intentionally going for, like, a deep afternoon kind of, like, setting sun energy here. Speaking of, let's fix the sky a little bit with a little bit of hue. A little bit of hue shifting. Okay, so we're right above the sky. There we go. That'll do. Cool. Alright, we got ourselves a pretty good sky there. This very clearly indicates where the light is coming from in the sky as well. Let's give ourselves that nice bright orange ball. Go into basics here. So as you can see, it's very strong. We're going to drop to like 15%. There we go. You can actually sort of chase the evening a little bit this way. Because the sky will actually fade and shift color in different phases. So the closer to the sun you get, the more golden it is. The further away you get to more red, and eventually you get to indigo. So we're seeing an actual nightfall here ahead of us. And usually it's more visible from the bottom up. So we're going to go into the clouds here very fast. I'm going to do this as an overlay. I'm going to get a soft light. 25%. I'm going to go to our brushes here. Grab that. 25. Soft light overlay. We're going to jack that up to like the brightest kind of pink. So we can actually get a little shaping in on these clouds. There we go. Usually, whenever you're working with clouds, less is more. Word of advice. And when you're drawing this, like, most clouds have, like, 3 tones. Dark, mid, and light. And usually it goes from the direction of the sun. And also how much light refracts through them. There's this concept called subsurface scattering that normally you would apply to skin, but theoretically you can apply it to clouds, too. Which is why clouds will turn fantastic colors at different, like, usually around sunrise and sunset, because the sunlight will filter through them, and basically like a prism, it'll amplify that light. So you can get some beautiful clouds, like golden and red, especially like around where the sun is at that time of day, or if it's towards sunset in the evening, or sunrise in the morning. It's really good. There's like that golden hour that you can do some really fun stuff with clouds. But when you have that bright light, the contrast also becomes darker. Also, depending on how heavy your clouds are, if they're rain clouds, they become more opaque. The clouds literally become denser, and they block more light out. Hence why thunder clouds look black. It's not that they're actually black, it's that light doesn't cut through them as easily. So, that's sort of your little science moment with Omni here. Science with Omni! Telling you how shit works. Alright, so we're going to go over to... I'm going to grab this color. And we're going to have a little fun with it. This isn't exactly correct. I'm going to go for like a cyan blue. Yeah, there you go. That'll do. A little more teal. Kind of turquoisey. Turquoise works. Okay. Let's do an overlay here. And put this at like 75%. Beautiful. Let's go. Okay. This starts getting us the actual colors of the gemstones here. We're going to put this on normal mode at 65%. And just cut a couple of these little, like, stones in the middle here. Beautiful. Okay, cool. So that works. Let's start getting some light in here now. So we're going to do a vivid light first. Put this at like 25%. Even that might be a little too strong. Yeah, a little too strong. Let's put it at 15%. Save what we got. Never forget to save, folks. Trust me, you'll thank me later. So you kind of want to have the light sort of emanating from within when you're dealing with gemstones. And now we're going to get this to 75% and start outlining the actual facets here. And your facets don't have to be perfect when you're working with, like, broken gemstone or raw cut gems. As long as each of the prism components line up, you're good. You can have the weirdest shapes you want. But at the end of the day, as long as they can, 1, come to an eventual point, and 2, work with what you need, you're usually pretty good improvising whatever shapes you want. I actually recommend a little technique I've been using for a long time for working on gems, which I just like to call go crazy. Sort of just take your hand and start drawing lines. Lay out a blob and then begin to like sketch a bunch of ways that's cut apart. Consider multiple facets. So like for me, usually whenever I think about like a gemstone, I think about the big the over-shaped chaos emeralds from Sonic the Hedgehog, right? And usually I'll just choose how many sides they have. Like a die. If you're a tabletop role player, I think I hit your number right there. Choose your favorite die and go with that shape. Dodecahedron if you're a D20 fan. Perhaps you really want to go with a 6-sided or an 8-sided prism. In this case, I have gone with a, like, again, the sort of the emerald, the archetypal emerald ruby shape here, which is, in this case, a 6-sided prism on the one end, a 6-sided pyramid on the other, on one end, and on the other end, a 6-sided sort of more like simple divot shape on the other. So we're looking at a 12-sided shape, which I believe that would be a... What's the word for a 12-sided shape again? It's been a while. It's not a dodecahedron, I don't think. 12-sided 3D shape. Name? It is dodecahedron. Okay. It's just a weirdly shaped dodecahedron. I was like, I thought it was You see, that's what I get for not trusting myself. Anyway, so that's kind of the easy thing. Start with a paler color and then work your way up. Usually low opacity. Because the light will filter in from the center, because that's how prisms refract light. They kind of bandy them about inside. The outer layer will often appear dull, and the inner layer will appear quite vibrant. At least for, like, foggy gems, like what I'm doing here. Let's put this at 25%. Now for these little guys are simple light sources because they're actually cameras. Or rather, I should say, they are some kind of sensor or some kind of cool little feedback device. They're an electronic component, so we can sort of run with that. Alright, so we got ourselves that. We're going to get ourselves a brighter shade now. We're going to do the same thing, 10%. And I'm going to switch this over. This is on vivid light. Put this on hard light for a minute. See how that works. Good, good, good. Now you got to be careful because there's a tendency for these to overexpose. And it's very hard to come back from overexposing something. There is a way, but it's kind of a pain. It's a pain in the ass, if we're being completely honest here. Okay. At this point, we're now going to a normal brush, just for the convenience of it. Cool. Alright. We're then going to move even higher into a very bright white. So first parts first. Put this at 75%. We're going to do some outlines here. Because we're going to need a lot of bright light to make sure these facets don't become completely invisible. Beautiful. Okay. Now that we're here, let's amp it up a tad. Now, I recommend, again, when you're working with a gemstone shape, you're basically creating smaller and smaller versions of the larger gemstone within it, in terms of where the light source is, because it's refracting through that shape. There we go. So we got ourselves a nice bright glow there. Let's get ourselves down here and get some camera details. So usually whenever I'm doing like a light source, I think about it as either an LED, a camera lens, or a single like bright halogen light. LEDs actually, if you were talking about how their light works, I'm just going to show off in this corner. Actually, we'll just do it here in this space here. So an LED strip actually looks more like this, where you have the actual strip of lighting of light. There'll be usually a pair of contacts on each side, and in the middle there'll be a square, a single pixel. It'll be either a square or a rectangle. A lot of them are like actual strip rectangles, and that will be where the actual light comes from. And LEDs just arrayed with hundreds of these things in strips or in squares. we're talking about a halogen light, instead of being a pixel, is a single point of light. Usually draw a single cross through it. And this is one of those fun parts about having astigmatism, because effectively it's like having foggy windshields all the time. More or less on my glasses, which gives me an interesting way to play with light. This is why we always see the depiction of, like, the four-pointed star. Whoever drew that had astigmatism. That right there is a single source of light, if you want to have a really intense light source. You could even, if you want, have, like, a single line going through it a little bit. And have, like, getting further away. Like the light sort of reflecting off of that. That's the light scattering across whatever's picking it up. So that would be a halogen light. But if we're doing cameras, which is what I'm using this as the source of light here, this is a very weird kind of source of light. Now, technically, this isn't how actual cameras work. Actual cameras are darker inside. They're trying to gather light, not emit it. But usually, when you're doing this kind of thing, you can sort of rule of cool it a little bit. What you want to do is capture the irises, a lot like drawing an eye. So that means the outer iris is almost always ringed with a device that's designed to contract. That's actually what the iris is. It's literally a contracting device that allows you to change the focus and the amount of light that comes in and out of the camera. And then within, you can actually see the shape of the camera, usually. Often occluded by the actual depth of the camera itself. So if you're viewing a light source from the side, you're only going to get to see part of that. Which is actually, you can see how I sort of did that. Same sort of technique. And then you sort of just make that light source come from within. And there we go. Got ourselves a nice little camera style thing. Now in this case, we're only going to get to see part of that iris, because it's already occluded by the side here. There we go. Cool. I'm going to put this like a really low opacity so we can get a little more light in there. And put this on a soft light shape. There we go. Get a little, just doing a little shaping here where we can. Nice. Okay, so that works pretty well. Let's get on to our ceramic parts. So again, I'm trying to ape pottery here with the shape. So that means these are sort of like raised ceramic decorations on the actual pot itself. And we'll do the same thing here. Cool. So I'm going to take a moment here. Hold on. We're going to save this. Nice. Okay, it's been saved. We're going to take a moment here, and I'm going to check up on the questions that my folks have been asking me lately. So lately, if I go all the way down on the red site, and I'm going to start asking my actual Patreon folks these questions in case any of them has any, in case any of my paying patrons or following patrons have any questions, you can ask me there. Let's see if I go all the way up here. Let's see, here we go. Alright, last questions that were asked on this. Let's see, I can probably go all the way up here. Let's see, so last question was, what is Gentry's relationship to the other psyops in Gentry Dolaan Ain't No Fascist? Is he a lone wolf kind of guy, or is he cool with accepting help? That's a great question, and an interesting one at that as well. It's actually been asked both by Z, and also by Silence. Zealad Gervik. Just want to make sure I got that right. Zealad Gervik and Silence. Two folks that I've actually had folks ask me these questions about. So, let's talk for a second about Gentry and our Helldiver stuff. So we're going to pop on over to our stretch page here, because I think this is a pretty cool panel to, like, have in the background while we talk about Gentry. So, actually, let's have him over here. Here we go. So, Gentry, as a character, in regards to the other psyops, and for those of you who are wondering what psyops are, and we're not talking about the, we're not talking about the conspiracy theory version of this. That was just sort of chosen as a tongue-in-cheek joke. For those of you who are unaware, the incredibly talented Red Right Hand, who is one of the folks that I work with and parallel to in this space, our webcomics kind of share not quite the same timeline, but like a very similar. We're both sort of in the same like creative space with it. Red started this idea, this sort of greater art project in the Helldivers art community known as Trader Divers, also called Cyber Operatives, hence Psy-Op. The logo actually is very cool. Let me see if I can get that open. It's going to be in the... Oh, right. It's going to be all the way up here in our designs. Where did I put that? It should be in... emotes. Duh. Here we go. Okay. So, in regards to our sub-factions, we have a number of basic icons we can go with. And I'm just going to open this up correctly. See if I can open this up with just photos. That'll do. Okay, cool. So, Cyber Operatives. For those of you familiar with the original Helldiver icon, you'll know the simple skull. Cyber Operatives don't technically have an icon. This is just the icon we use for the parlance of any streams or webcomics we do. This was originally done by Red Right Hand, who again you can find at this location right here on their Blue Sky. They're incredibly cool. And also their Patreon, which I highly, highly, highly recommend. They're actually really awesome. Give them a link, give them a follow. Their Patreon's full of really cool art. They do a bunch of art projects every month. They do a whole thing where they actually let folks vote on what they're going to draw every month in regards to one of their titular characters. Anyhow, so Cyber Operatives are a very specific sub-faction within the webcomics, where the automaton faction of the Helldivers, or of the Helldivers universe, are basically scurrying off with Helldivers who get captured behind enemy lines and giving them a choice. Either die or become a cyber operative. Often by appealing to them, to their good nature by saying, hey, help us end the war. We don't want to kill everybody. You can help us find a solution. Usually by like trying to negotiate with other people or engaging in the case of most people, behind enemy lines backstabbing work. Literal, that kind of spycraft stuff. As well as just like direct sabotage. Direct acts of sabotage. So Cyber Operatives started with Red's Dell character, known as Dolaan. I guarantee you all have seen Dolaan. They are everywhere. They are literally Red's titular main character. Like, I'm actually just going to open up a picture. Here we go. This is actually their art reference. That's Dolaan, the original Cyber Operative. And so, as a result, ever since then, the Mediator, who is that icon there, the Mediator, an incredibly powerful automaton intelligence, command intelligence, started creating cyber operatives, and they're pretty much in charge of the process. Now, in Gentry, Dolaan Ain't No Fascist, there's another creator of cyber operatives. You've already met this character, and that character is the Coordinator. That's right. Everyone's favorite angry soda can man is in fact one of the most important figures within the webcomic. You've all met him. That's him. Everyone say hi to the Coordinator. You can even see he's got the same shape. He's got the soda can head. He's got the 2 sets of little sub eyes and the 1 bright eye. Yeah, same thing. That's him. He's wide. He's begun to make his own cyber operatives known as Vanguard psyops. They're not actual psyops in the strictest sense. They're technically a sub-variety made with basically him reverse engineering the technology. So, how does Gentry feel about the other psyops? So far, I haven't answered that question for a simple fact that you guys haven't seen him encounter them yet. I will say that there was likely to be some rivalry between the Vanguard psyops that we see here and their logo. They even have a bespoke logo. These are Vanguard units, the original automatons that the Vanguard name came from, all made by the coordinator. And now Vanguard psyops inherit their icon and their title as Vanguards. So the Vanguard versus more traditional mediator psyops, there's going to be a lot of rivalry there. You're looking at 2 factions competing over the same space. It's never going to be easy. So, I suspect there's going to be a little bit of chaos in there at their first meeting. Also, a fair bit of intrigue. Don't forget, they're all double agent spies. So, the one thing that solidifies your safety more than anything else is making sure that you're not the spy that gets compromised. That someone else is. So, keep an eye on that development as it shows up. So I haven't answered that yet, but that would be it. In terms of other psyops, there's a ton of other psyops characters on a red server, and every once in a while I'll even be referencing them in the comic. Once we get Gentry off of Chuhi, you'll start seeing some Easter eggs popping up here and there. There's already been a couple of Easter eggs here and there. I'm not going to give them away. Except for those of you who are interested in actually reading the whole comic, highly recommend you go to my Patreon and take a look for all those tasty, tasty Easter eggs. And again, if you're interested in reading Gentry, Dolaan Ain't No Fascist, you can find the entire thing. Let me just grab this. Right here, at this location. You don't need to be a subscriber in order to read it all. You just need to be a follower on the page. And you can catch up with the entirety of Gentry, Dolaan Ain't No Fascist there. If you're a paid subscriber, you get access to the latest episode of Gentry Dolaan 2 weeks early. Which is actually what this panel here is from. Oh, I really still like the way that looks. Anyway, we're going to pop back over here and get our little lore file going. I'm going to finish this piece of art today at very least. I want this little guy doodled. So, that is that question asked. And I have one more question I want to answer. Which, the DM on Red Right Hand server has asked, do all Vanguards share a similar shape to Vanguard 14? So, Vanguard 14... which, again, I'm going to share you guys this image very fast that I've got. Vanguard 14 is the current director of the Vanguard forces, in case the name didn't make that very clear. Vanguard 14 and the Vanguard program was making a bunch of automatons before the PsyOps started being a thing. They were designed to be counter Helldiver units. Basically, each customized in a specific way to undermine how Helldivers fight. So one, as an example, was a short-ranged aerial skirmisher. Would leap in and slaughter Helldivers from unexpected quarters. Another one was a heavily armored fortification Vanguard, which would masquerade as an actual piece of, like, artillery or a, basically this heavy armored bunker that would then stand up and beat the shit out of a bunch of Helldivers who weren't expecting a building to start moving. And instead just thought it was a weird-looking, like, mortar emplacement. Vanguard 14 is built as a sniper, primarily around a heavy artillery cannon, a shoulder-mounted field gun, designed to puncture through hellpods and kill their occupants before they make landfall, hence the giant fuck-off rifle there. So that gives you an idea of the baseline of what the Vanguards are. They're all built around a similar chassis. Their parts are literally, like, swappable. If anyone here played with Bionicle as a kid, or Lego Technic, that's basically what we're talking about here. All their component parts are interchangeable in field and out of field, so they can tinker with their design as they like. Their heads are all uniquely shaped but share similar functions, namely 4 sets of sensors, one facing in each cardinal direction, forward, sideways, behind them, and each sensor array being made of 3 eyes, namely 1 central eye and 2 smaller ranging eyes. So Vanguard can literally see around themselves 360 degrees at all times. They literally can see in all directions. The only place they normally can't see is directly above them, and they can simply crane their head to move in whatever direction they'd like. So they're not eyeless up there or anything, they simply just move their head for that. But as far as that goes, their body plans, while similar, usually being humanoid with digitigrade legs and longer, lankier bodies, after all, you can see in the background of this picture, this is as tall as Gentry. As that white shadow in the background is Gentry to scale, and he's 6 foot tall. Compared to a Vanguard, who I believe, Vanguard 14, stands casually at 7 feet, and can telescope all the way up to 10 feet with their unique legs. So, the Vanguard program isn't all the same design, but they share enough components where there are similarities. So if anyone wants to make a Vanguard character out there, there you go. I'll upload this eventually to the Patreon as well. I really want to do more work with this. I believe we actually have a lore blurb about the Vanguard on my Patreon already. So I could take a look at that later. Make sure, because I think I do. I think that's already there. Yes, that's right. Yeah, the Vanguard program is Week 13's lore dump. So it's already on there along with that art. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to take a look at it. It's a fun read. So, we're going to go back over here. And we're just going to sort of finish this off. So we've got the general shape here of that. Let's increase the brightness. This is where we're going to do both the Cyber Swarm and also the Cultivator itself. There we go. And then we're going to go onto the little swarm here. Good. That's the part I want. We're going to save this. So this part's a little bit more ceramic than the rest of it. I figure, like, they're made of mostly carbon fiber, but then you've got that little, like, ceramic bit there. Now, the fun part about these little cyber swarms is if you cut them open, there's actually brains in there. They're not just they're not robots. They're actually little cyborgs. Each one of these little guys is actually basically a small brain in a weird little body made specifically to task. Literally adapted and genetically modified to perfectly be housed within their strange little body shape. And their fun little body plan. They're cute little guys. And yes, if that's a little horrifying, good. That's the goal. I want it to be a little weirdy. We are in a grimdark setting, after all. There we go. We got that little bit there. So pull that over the top. There we go. We got that nice shade of yellow on that. We're going to do the same thing on the cultivator fast. And then we're going to hit all this with a whole bunch of lighting, because lighting is the answer. At least for me. And what's the answer to the question? Cancer. Sorry, DC jokes. I don't make them very often, but every once in a while. Yeah. Rest in peace. Rest in peace, question. Oh wait, he came back. That's right. He came back. It's fine. The question found the answer to cancer. It's cool. Alright, cool. So we got this. That feels pretty good. I just want to get a little bit more detail on the metallics of this. So this is actually a metallic component here. It's like the only metallic component on this thing. So we're going to get in here, sort of get it around the edges. Cool. Now we can go over this with a nice glow layer to capture the light of the setting sun. But first I find it works better to have like an underlying color that's accurate and that works. Here we are. I want to make sure these little MacGuffins are properly designed, because they're going to play a very big role in the webcomic. We're going to see these things a lot more. Hey, John Johnson, pleasure to have you on board. How you doing? Doing laundry and tuning in? Pleasure to have you, my friend. Pleasure to have you. Just doing a little webcomic garden, vibing. Really excited for this coming week's Gentry. Here we go, just sort of slapping this down. Here we are. We're getting right towards the end of it. We're in the last 10 minutes of it. I'm glad you can make it, my friend. Truly. Okay, so we got ourselves a pretty solid metallic sheen to that. Let's go to the other side and darken it. I know that sounds crazy, but trust me, that's how you do metals. You make a very sharp contrast between the dark and the light. The line between dark and light is so very thin, Guardian. We got a hell dive soon. It's been a minute. It really has. This is a very sad part about being a webcomic artist, folks. Especially if you're a fan webcomic artist. You end up doing so much work, you don't really get to actually play the game that you're making the thing about very often. I'm trying to get back into it, so... But yeah, no, absolutely. I would really love to hell dive with you guys again. It just feels like every time you guys are hell diving, I'm busy. I'm also... I can't say that it hasn't been getting exceptionally crazy on, like, the organizing side of things as of late. Stuff's getting nuts, and there's a lot of battening down the hatches. Okay there, Eris Morn. Excuse me, that was actually, I believe, that was Prince Aldrin. Prince Aldrin who did that one. That was in, oh man, what's the name of that expansion? Oh, it's been so long. Forsaken. That was Forsaken. Let you have you schedule around. Just let me know when you're free. Hell yeah. At this point, mostly on weekends. Mostly on weekends, Fridays. There we go. Awesome. Cool, so we got ourselves a pretty solid design there. Let's get to the rest of this. Let's put that at like a 5%, I think? Yeah, 5%. It's almost like applying mascara at that level. Here we go. It's very pale, but that's good. That's what we want. Cool. So we got that. We're gonna get on top here as well. This is that same carbon fiber material. You want it to read as the same material and just have like a really sharp edge. There we are. Okay, cool. Cool, we got this. Alright, so I'm going to put this on 25% so that the light kind of comes off the edge of this. Put that at 10%. Sounds like the train's coming through town. Got the Vermonter about now. Cool. So that works. I'm just going to zoom in. We're going to blur that a little bit. Save. I'm just going to sort of wash that around a little bit. There we go. Beautiful. Sometimes you get a tool and it just does its job perfectly, and I'm just grateful for it. Beautiful. That'll do. Okay. Cool. So we got that little guy more or less done. I feel like we can start adding in a lot of the other coloration we've been dancing around. Close this, close a bunch of the extra details here. Cool. Alright, I think we can go with the grass that I was drawing earlier. We're going to go with the Brothers webcomic that I've been using as reference here. The color reference is real easy to work with in this instance. Cool. We're going to take this. We're going to overlay that. Put that at a 45% overlay. And go ham. So a pale green often is a great place to start for any kind of like grass. Especially if it's dry. You don't want to make it too vibrant. Like, if you were, when you were a kid and you were drawing art, have you ever like just doodled with like the brightest possible bold colors? It didn't look bad, like you nailed what they were, but it was a little too strong. Yeah, that's why. You want to build with a pale color, and then add saturation onto it, usually. If you start with like the most saturated color, desaturating is a lot less easy than saturating. Think of this for those of you who are mini painters out there. This is like your primer layer. You build up from this. Everything else is built around this color. Cool, cool. Awesome. So now we can actually start adding in some detail. This is where I'll actually start getting these brushes and start going ham a little bit. Now because this is the darker side, we're going to use a darker shade. Sort of get the texture of the grass. Especially in regards to where the little guy is. We'll do the same thing over here. Also, as a general rule of thumb, whenever you're drawing something in the background, it usually loses opacity, and it's darker. So, when in doubt, if you're having a background element, you're like, it looks like it's a little too far forward. It probably is. Hit it with another blast of color. Trust me on that. Darken that bitch up. Darken your background. Give that background some color. Backgrounds love dark color. You can always go over it later, too. That's the nice part. There's no, like, limit on how much you can build up color or take it down. Okay, cool. So we got a pretty good setup here. Save this. Okay. So let's get ourselves a color. I think we'll go with this one. It's a little more green. A little more green? Yeah, a little more green. There we go. Okay. So now we're not on overlay anymore. Now we're going to go to actual normal color. 25%. And let's start adding some detail. Let's actually make that 45. Whoop, wrong part to scratch on. There we go. And we're just going to hit this like that. Beautiful. Now we got a little bit of grass here. Usually, again, a little bit of detail goes a long way. You don't need to do, like, every blade of grass, but just, like, a couple of little bits of, like, grass just poking up. Really adds a lot of detail. Especially as you start getting into the dark areas. Like, just a little bit will do you good. So make sure they're all roughly facing the same direction, as grass tends to move with the wind. So you don't want to have, like, randomly too much grass facing the wrong way. It's one thing if there's, like, a blade of grass out of place here and there. Like, that actually adds a little detail to it that's okay. But it needs to make sense in the context of what you're doing. And when you're at a great distance, you don't really need to worry about grass at all very much. I recommend just doing, like, a slightly feathered brush stroke, kind of. Like sketching. And just do it over and over from that direction, and it'll get you the right effect pretty quickly. As you can see. Fun fact, you can actually see my stigmatism at work there. I sort of like angle and look at different angles. It helps. Okay, and then finally, we get this over here. And we can start getting to work on our randomized lighting effects. This is where I lose a lot of time. It's easy to forget how effective a lighting situation can be. So let's start with shadow. I'm going to do overlay on this. So, shadows. Where is the sun facing? Where is it not? Sun's on the other side, on the right-hand side of our picture, which I usually just presume, like, northeast, southwest, with west being, like, you know, left hand. So we just sort of do that. There we go. You sort of get in there, and a little bit of messy's not a bad thing. A little messy's not a bad thing. Here we go. We do the same thing on this side. Same thing with the rocks on that end. Here we go. We can add a little bit of darkness to the far side of those rocks and that hill there. Really sort of drive home that they're not in focus. Cool. So now we just got a little bit of detail left to add, which is light. Where there's shadow, there is always light. And we're going to go with the light of the fading sun, which is a pale orange. We're going to actually jack that up to a much brighter orange. Save that. And now we're going to just do a little bit of edge highlighting. Those of you who are familiar with miniature painting, you will be very familiar with this technique. Basically, wherever there's a raised, like, ledge on a mini, paint it. Re-outline it in that color. It'll give you a stunningly good contrast to whatever the environmental lighting is. Now, if there's any part where it doesn't look like there's enough, like, visibility on it, hit it with that outline. Just trust me on that. It's going to look good. Worst thing that'll happen, it doesn't, and then you can just take it off. Just do it on a different layer so you can always, you know, shear it down. 75% of the time, it works every time. Now we're going to hit this, 25%. That's even too strong. 5%. There we go, and now to sort of catch the edge of the light as it fades. Where it's most intense. Because this is metallic, the light will reflect a lot more on it. And fade very quickly. There we go. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to do a couple little fun details here. 15%. Going to add some... Let's make it a little stronger. 25%. There we go. I'm going to add a little bit of, like, coloration to some of these bits of grass in the distance. Sort of helps things along a little bit. And then I usually like to do a little bit of, like, environmental weather. It just sort of helps bring the whole thing together. Makes the piece feel real, in a way. So I'm debating if I should do, like, a fog or, like, a rolling cloud of thunder or something. I don't know. I'm still sort of playing around with it a little bit. And when in doubt, light it up. Cool. Brightest point would be here on this. There we go. Now we can add the lighting effect from the gem as well. And I think that's what I'll tie it all together with. The gem is a very distinctive source of light that can't be found anywhere else on this. Like, there's some stuff that has, like, a little bit of light, but, like, nowhere near the coloration you're going to see off of that gemstone. That gemstone is very distinctive. There we go. I do my best to follow those other, like, blades of grass where I can. Sort of help me along a little bit. Here we go. It sort of lets people know where the light is, where the grass blades are, that kind of thing. And where it sort of peeks through. It helps influence where that light is falling. Okay, cool. Now we're going to do the actual gemstone light. This is going to be with a soft light first. So let's do the brightest parts. The gemstone is resting, is absolutely going to be reflecting that light very intensely. There is a little plinth there in the middle for it. We're not quite at the same level of, like, Knuckles the Echidna Guardian of the floating island here, but, like, still, it's that same sort of vibe. Now, again, you're not going to find this blue light anywhere else on this painting, save from this stone. So you have to be real careful with where you put it. This is going to shape a lot of where things are. So I'm going to go down here, 25%. And I'm using it as kind of a counter light to the sun as it fades in the distance. There we go. Wherever the sun is, this light is. Wherever the sun isn't, this light is. Ugh, that's the words I was trying to say. Said them in the wrong order, but we got there. And unlike the sun, it has a plunging angle on this little guy that actually can get into little crevices and stuff. The sunlight couldn't. again, we're going to just add a little bit of light there. That will have found its way on. There we go. That works. And just a little bit of blue there. Bring that to like a 10%. And this is what I mean by environmental lighting really helps tell a story. It helps pull a piece together. The brighter your environmental lighting, the more intense you can make it, the more it'll make the different geometries and shapes pop in what you're working on. I highly, highly recommend studying light. If you want to do a piece of art that you think will look really good, that you really, really want to, like, hit the ground running, light does a great thing for you. It removes a lot of the uncertainty of where things are. And again, we're just going to hit this in places where the light would reach, but that the sun might not. Now, the light does have an area where it can't reach, which is back here on the other side of the scarab. So we're not going to worry about that. But these blades here do, in fact, have that light hitting them. We do the same thing back here. So right along the edge of where this plinth is, the light can't reach. It's too far. Unless it's particularly tall, like the tall blades of grass it can reach. There we go. And just like that, we have ourselves a shiny little dude. I'm going to add a little bit of, like, framing darkness. This is called a vignette. For those of you who are unfamiliar with what the actual terminology is. A vignette is the black area that surrounds a picture. Oftentimes it's very, like, soft and fuzzy. It's designed to help frame. It's a framing device. So we're going to start this on a very low opacity. There we go. I'm making this a darker overlay. This won't interfere with any of the actual color that we're using on this picture. It'll just darken it out. So we'll still keep all that cool imagery, all that cool play with light that we had. We're just adding a nice little square of black around it so that it will naturally sit well in a painting or in a picture frame, or in the case of my webcomic, in a panel. It's possible to do a vignette with light as well. So if you're in a daytime environment, you can absolutely use white on the edges or gray. Though black tends to be the easiest because it fades into whatever you're working with pretty quickly. There we go. A cultivator and a little cyber swarm buddy to keep an eye on it. I feel pretty good about that. Our first peek at the Saurian as the Saurian Star Host in Brothers. I'm really hyped about this one. I really appreciate everybody who is involved. I feel like I can go a little further with the light. I will. I'll do one last little step at it, and then we're going to be done for the day. Because I actually have shit to get to. I have other things to do today. Believe it or not, this guy's got a life. Not much of one, but I do have one. Okay, we're going to do a pin light here. Put that at 25%. And I'm going to do something I'm going to try something. So this is a cool technique I've seen some people do, where what you do is you try your best to mimic the shapes of the cuts on the actual thing you're drawing. And that will create distortions in the light in a very prismatic sense. And we'll see how that looks. And if it doesn't look good, I'll just undo it and walk away. It doesn't look bad, but I'm not sure I'm liking the effect with it. I'll have to play around with it a little more to see if it turns out good. Okay, that's actually not too bad. I kind of like that. It gives a little extra focus on the lighting, and that's good by me. So, with that, folks, we're done for the day. I want to thank everybody who tuned in today. I appreciate you. I'm very tongue-tied today. Again, if you enjoyed the art stream, please like, subscribe, comment. I'm a tiny channel. It makes a huge difference. And if you're interested in supporting me, again, your best place to do that is on Blue Sky and also here. But primarily, your real best bet is just Patreon. Again, that is patreon.com/TheLastOmnitect. And also, a huge thank you to my supporters. I actually do have a couple of them. Namely, for my awesome trusted comrades. Right now, we have the incredible Necronomulus. Necronomulus, thank you so much for supporting the channel. It means a ton. You're an incredible creator and an awesome friend, and I'm genuinely happy to have your support. And for every other person that subscribes at the tier 2 or higher, I will personally be shouting you out at the end of every video moving forward. Take care, Voyagers. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you out there. Peace.